After Henry VIII died, there was a huge power play for influence in the court of his successor Edward VI. His son was just a young boy, and it's believed that his reign would be a long and prosperous one, in which Edward would provide many heirs for the Tudor dynasty. But this never occurred, as a young boy king died at such a young age. Edward never really achieved his potential as a monarch, as a Regency Council ruled on behalf for him, until he would become old enough to make sound decisions. But the most important man in power in the Regency Council was Edward's uncle, Edward Seymour, who was very powerful and was acting as the Lord Protector. But despite being pretty much the ruler of the country, Edward Seymour himself fell from grace and was executed on Tower Hill in front of a large crowd. But what happened? Join us today as we look at the brutal execution of the Lord Protector, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. During the reign of King Henry VIII, Edward Seymour was the Earl of Hertford and was a brother of Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour. Jane is often considered Henry's favourite wife, as she gave him the son he greatly wanted and the heir to the throne. But whilst Henry was away, Edward Seymour was involved in looking after London and the country, and he later in 1542 became the Warden of the Scottish Marches and also the Lord High Admiral. He continued to thrive inside of the military, and in March 1544 became the Lieutenant General of the North, and Henry VIII put him to work punishing the Scottish with regards to Edward being married to the infant Queen of Scotland, Mary, or Mary Queen of Scots. Edward landed in Leith, pillaged and burned in Edinburgh, and killed scores through his rampages. He burned more settlements and villages, and his English army massacred thousands in the War of the Rough Wooing. It was England's most brutal attack north for centuries, and Seymour became one of the strongest military commanders in Europe. When he returned to Scotland, he even burned cornfields to make the Scots starve. But as Henry VIII got sick and his health declined, Edward Seymour was involved in the debates with the king about what would happen following his death. Edward Seymour was the uncle of the boy who would become the king. It was clear he was well trusted and favoured, and Henry VIII dictated in his will that 16 men would act as Edward's counsel following his death, until the young boy became of sound mind to make good decisions. They would be helped by another 12 men, who would help decide upon other issues. But many men of the council were rewarded by huge grants of land and wealth, as Edward Seymour became the Lord Protector of the realm, and also the Duke of Somerset. It was not stipulated that a protector was needed, but Seymour was placed in power, making him the de facto ruler in England. Seymour quickly took over, and it was said he had absolute power, but one of his biggest problems and rivals was his brother Thomas, who was obsessed with power, and to further himself he quickly married the former King Henry VIII's widow, Catherine Parr. Thomas was a thorn in his brother's side, and he spread a number of great rumours about his brother, and Thomas even tried to kidnap Edward VI. He was caught outside his apartments and was armed, but Thomas was charged with a huge number of crimes, including treason, and Edward Seymour even signed his own brother's death warrant, and he was then executed on Tower Hill. Seymour did change a number of rules in England. For example, he dismissed the former heresy and treason rules, which did lead to less people being executed, and he tried to negotiate with the Scottish, but they were not happy. They continued to be hostile, and Edward then led another army north. Seymour also helped to introduce the Book of Common Prayer, and helped push through a number of different reforms with the church, many which were very unpopular. But one of the greatest skills Edward Seymour had was that he was a gifted military leader, and in Scotland he set up many English garrisons, but these were very costly and led to the English crown's finances being rather strained. In 1548, unrest hit the country, and a number of rebellions caused problems for Edward. There were a number of armed rebellions that broke out in Devon, Cornwall and Norfolk, but this year was a great problem for the Lord Protector. He became a significant figure of hatred and dissent across England. One of the most significant rebellions was Kett's rebellion, and Kett was a landowner and believed it was morally wrong for people to enclose common land. Along with other protesters, 16,000 armed men camped outside the walls of Norwich, and then the rebellion got more serious. Kett's army stormed into the city armed with pitchforks, swords, shields, and other weapons, and they seized control of Norwich. They defeated the mayor's rule, and then Edward Seymour sent men to deal with this, but the king's soldiers were forced to flee. After this, the Earl of Warwick was then sent, and he took 13,000 soldiers to deal with Kett's uprising. Kett eventually fled the city, but Edward Seymour was shown as a weak and rather poor leader, and further criticism came his way. It was documented to him that every man of the council have misliked your proceedings. Would to God that at the first stir you had followed the matter hotly, and caused justice to be ministered in solemn fashion to the terror of others. However, the anger centred around land ownership reforms, and this is eventually what led to Seymour's fall from grace. The rebellions and unpopularity led to many to dig their talons into Seymour, and by the 1st of October 1549, he knew he was in danger, and he asked for help. He took the King Edward VI under his custody and went to Windsor Castle. Whilst this happened, the council published writings about Seymour's crimes and mishandling of government business in the king. They said that the Protector was powerful because of the council, and not because of what Henry VIII wished. But on the 11th of October 1549, Seymour was arrested and was then taken to Richmond to meet with the king. Edward VI, the king, read out the charges against his uncle, and he was accused of ambition, vainglory, entering into rash wars of my youth, negligence, looking on Newhaven, enriching himself of my treasure, following his own opinion, and doing all by his own authority. He gave over the title Lord Protector and was deposed by an Act of Parliament in January 1550. He was sent to the Tower of London and was held as a prisoner before he was firstly freed by the Earl of Warwick, and then spectacularly he came back onto the Regency Council. But the following year he was arrested again and sent back to the Tower of London, and was accused of treason. More crimes were levelled against him, including planning to murder councillors and the Earl of Warwick, and he was found guilty and was sentenced to death. Whilst awaiting his death in the Tower of London, he wrote, "Fear of the Lord is beginning of my wisdom. Put thy trust in the Lord with all thine heart," being found in a small book. He then signed this off with, "From the Tower, the day before my death." It was on Tower Hill where Edward Seymour, the most powerful man in Edward VI's land, was executed. On the morning of the 22nd of January 1553, he was awoken in his cell at the Tower at 8 a.m. He was then taken on the short walk north of the Tower's walls to Tower Hill and the public beheading spot. Over the decades, influential figures such as Thomas Cromwell, John Fisher and Thomas More were beheaded on Tower Hill, as was Edward's brother Thomas Seymour. A scaffold was where the execution took place on, and Edward Seymour believed he could have been given a royal pardon from the king. But this never happened. As he climbed the steps of the scaffold, he prayed and gave himself to God and God's will. He then addressed a huge crowd who witnessed his execution, and said he was sentenced to death by law, and that he accepted the decision of the king and the council. But he did think he had done nothing wrong. He said he remained close with God, and was thankful that he had been given time to pray. But as he finished speaking, a huge rush came towards the scaffold, and Seymour believed it was his pardon. But it was actually a large number of guards who arrived late, but they brought with them no stay of execution. Seymour then in his hand had his cap, and he spoke to the crowd, saying, "For albeit the spirit be willing and ready, the flesh is frail and wavering, and through your quietness I shall be more quiet." He spoke with the executioner and prayed for a quick and swift execution, consisting of one blow from the axe. He read a final confession and then took the hands of the men on the scaffold and parted with a number of gold rings, giving them to the executioner for his payment. He then removed his gown and calmly laid his head on the block, and the executioner then untied the strings of his shirt collar. He was given a handkerchief to tie round his eyes, and then he put his hands to God one more time, and put his head on the block. His final words were, "O Lord Jesus, preserve me," and with one swift blow from the axe, the executioner struck down, and Edward Seymour's head was taken clean off. His remains were then put in a wooden chest, and were buried inside the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, inside the walls of the Tower of London. Edward Seymour's execution was very shocking and brutal. He was considered the most powerful man in the Kingdom of England during the reign of Edward VI, and he was considered a very brilliant and brutal military leader. But his greatest downfall was many of the changes he brought into their land, as many of these were unpopular, and rebellions and uprisings emerged across England. He was a Lord Protector whose fate was sealed by the axe on Tower Hill. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.